All right, my name's Casey Charvet. I'm the CTO and Director of Technology and Innovation at TourGigs, and we live stream concerts. What I've got here just for a warm-up is a live stream that we did with My Morning Jacket from Red Rocks in Golden, Colorado. This is a simulated live stream. This is how it would appear if you were watching it from home while it's going. We're doing, this is sort of entering our full platform pipeline, but from a recorded file. So this is sort of an exact demonstration of what we do. We do multi-camera live shoots primarily for these sort of live events. And with that, let me go ahead and stop that. And all right, so the title of this talk is Backstage with TourGigs, and it's going to be a pretty open format, just sort of walk you through our production pipeline from start to finish. And if you have any questions during it, I think we have plenty of time. I prepped about a 20-minute talk, but we have lots of extra time. So if you want to stop and begin a discussion, just grab my attention. All right, so quick overview of TourGigs. We began TourGigs by filming live concerts in 2011 with 3 founders. I was not one of these original founders. We have compiled a catalog of 58 full-length concert films, and we've now got over 200 in the pipeline. So the rate at which we've been producing shows has been dramatically accelerating, and we're still sort of catching up on the post-production aspect of that. Originally, in the beginning, the shows were sold as downloads and produced, is there a pointer by chance somewhere? I don't need a clicker, just, I can kind of wave.
I don't think we have a pointer, sorry.
Oh, okay, great. I should have asked earlier, sorry. Okay, I just need a laser pointer. So just let me use the laser here. Got it, okay. If that's, okay, great. So we prepared physical media and put quite a bit into the packaging and the artistic design and worked closely with the bands and artists to produce these and sold these through an e-commerce storefront, as well as offered them as digital downloads. We began live streaming in 2013, and this now accounts for 85% of all of our business. And we offer these live streams almost exclusively on tourgigs.com, although there's exceptions to everything. And we can work with partners and have worked with partners to put the live streams on different host websites. Our style is a multi-camera live shoot. It's not uncommon for us to have 10 or more cameras on a switch, and we've also covered multiple stages at festivals. So we have a good bit of production capacity that we've built up over the last couple of years. We currently have a full-time staff of 14 employees, and this is growing quickly. This includes our editors, our software developers, operations, production crew, customer support, you name it, sales and marketing. The TourGigs model is primarily to monetize these shows through pay-per-view, and our average price point for a show is $12.99. Sometimes it's a little less, sometimes it's a little more for special events, depending. But again, this is sort of our mean price point. We work directly with the artists. This is sort of how a production will originate. We don't really throw our own festival. We don't stage an event and book bands or anything like that. We go into an event that the band is already performing at and work closely with them. Typically, we cover the production costs for the live stream, and then we share in the upside on the pay-per-view receipts. Our motto is to travel fast and light and be unobtrusive. So we have to get in quickly. We have to set up, lay cables. We don't get a lot of space allocated to us most of the time. We've set up in anything from coat closet. It's not uncommon for us to be on card tables. I'll get into some of our on-site gear in a minute. We also like to be unobtrusive. This is sort of the fly-on-the-wall rock documentary style. We don't really want to have jibs flying all over the place. We don't want to have big podium cameras right in front of the stage in the pit where it's going to obstruct the view and detract from the overall concert experience. And I think that this translates very well to our productions. We have a high aesthetic and technical value in our productions. We view this as a premium product. We're asking users to pay money, so delivering anything less than that we feel would be insulting to them. At the same time, we really strive hard to control production costs. So this is our constant battling act of how do we have really high production value, but how do we do it on a reasonable budget to where we can easily cover costs and turn a profit by selling pay-per-view streams. And lastly, I think to do live, you have to be completely passionate and maybe a little bit crazy. There's a lot of moving parts. We don't get redos on this. We get one shot. If we mess it up, that's it. The band isn't going to wait to go on stage for us to get our act together. There's thousands of fans in the audience that have paid a ticket to see a concert. So we don't really have complete control over the stage production. We're just there to capture it. You know, our world is the video production. We have to take care of our stuff and make sure that that aligns with the actual stage and concert production. So just some example pictures of crazy stuff that happens. We never really know what to expect on a show. We get to see a lot of cool stuff, though. I'm not going to lie. It's fun to do rock and roll. This was at an outdoor festival in, I believe this was Phases of the Moon, which was in Illinois, or it might be Locke, and it kind of blends together at times. This is actually a shoot on a cruise ship that we did. Now, we didn't live stream from the cruise ship. That's technically not doable yet to any appreciable level. But we did film it, and then we released it afterwards. This is a cruise called Jam Cruise, where they have about 4 days of music on a cruise ship, and it's quite a show. We did a stream with Jack White. That was perhaps one of the best streams, best live shows I've ever seen. This was an outdoor show that we did at an outdoor arena in Chicago. That's the Chicago skyline in the back. And this is sort of a close-up screen grab from an Humphreys McGee show, a band that we work with quite a bit. So, okay, there we go, a little transition. So here's a sort of simplified block diagram of the components that go into one of our shoots. I would categorize everything that we do at the venue as on-site. Of course, we then have to get, and I'm going to go into each one of these in a little bit more detail. We then have to get from the site to our ingest points in our network. This is the backhaul, the last panel, if anybody was in there. Talked about a lot of the different backhaul options, and I'm going to touch on some of those that we use. We have our own video platform. It is sort of built around Wowza streaming engine, sort of in the middle. We also take care of our own host website. Many of these components run in the cloud. Rackspace is our preferred cloud vendor, but there's a number of cloud vendors out there. And then we do run some stuff on-prem in a data center as well for more persistent things. E-commerce is we've sort of outsourced that to a payment gateway just because we don't want to get into handling credit cards directly and PCI compliance. That's kind of a nightmare for the scale that we're at. But this is also, I just want to illustrate how many components there are in our workflow, and e-commerce is a very important one if we want to monetize. We do make heavy use of a CDN. If anybody heard the keynotes this morning, you know, CDNs are quite essential now, and you want to see a very high efficiency on your CDN offload and caching. So we do all of our own transcoding, but then pump the data to the CDN for edge delivery. Another component that I want to point out that is very important is the last mile and the end users. So we've asked somebody to pay. So in addition to the band being a client, we've got the hundreds or thousands of end users that have paid to watch our product as customers as well, that we need to support and take care of and make sure that they're having a good, compelling experience. And to back all this up, we've got an off-site operations and monitoring team that will take care of the events and monitor the events and look for signs of trouble, as well as communicate back to the on-site team if something needs to be changed. And often I'm sort of on-site, and if I'm not on-site, then I'm handling operations. And then we also have a customer support. This is a really new addition to our group, but a very important one. When we first started, one of the founders, Jake Saxby, had his cell phone number up on the website. And when we started doing pay-per-view streaming, people were calling him if they had trouble on his cell phone, and he's out at the show, so he's picking up his cell phone. He's like TourGigs, and he's trying to help people through customer support. And we realized very quickly that this was not sustainable, so we went ahead and got a VoIP PBX system going and support queues, and now we bring staff in to support the live events, sort of in an on-demand model, and that's worked out very well. Okay, so what happens on site? Well, I would say that multicam live is a style, first off, and you sort of need to be accustomed to that and practice with that. We use a mixture of camera bodies. We've used Micro Four Thirds style. We've used some ENG type cameras. We use Sony EX1s were kind of our workhorses for a long time. The Lumix cameras from Panasonic gave us a lot of life. But lately, we've really come to love these Super 35 sensor cameras like the Canon C300. And I just want to say right here that the camera bodies and the lenses and the shooters probably has a greater impact on the nature of the product than any other stage in the pipeline. Of course, if any part falls down, the live event's not going to work. But it really begins with a good live production and having good cameras, good glass, good shooters, good director. And if you don't have that, then everything else afterwards is sort of just a technical exercise, in my opinion. Tactical fiber is great stuff. We use tactical fiber a ton. SDI runs over copper. Oftentimes, we don't get enough length out of it because we have to set up at the back. We want to have like a camera at the rear of the auditorium. So we have very long runs, or if we're at a festival and we need to run to front of house, this can easily exceed the typical length that you can get out of HD SDI, so over copper. So running that over fiber is great. We use Blackmagic converters for that extensively. Often our video world will live on a folding table, sometimes in a coat closet. I say as often as a trailer or truck, but this is not true, actually. We're set up on card tables and in the closet more often than we have a truck at. But this kind of goes into our motto of being fast and light and being able to get in and out. Let's see, what else do we have? So to that extent, our switchers and converters, audio processors, the encoders, all of this can fit into one shock mount rack case that we can then fly around or ship around across the country as we travel from venue to venue. Our encoders are purpose-built, and the client is custom software. And we've tried a lot of solutions out there, and there's a lot of good solutions on the market. But at the end of the day, each time there was a problem with one of the commercial solutions, we had to look and say, okay, how could we improve this? What would make this better? And is it worth writing software to do so? And for us, the answer is yes. And so we've assembled a software team, and they've put together a really great client that we'll be having a public launch with under the Gigcasters moniker in a couple of months. And I have some pictures of the client interface. And lastly, I want to add that the field is our laboratory. It's a great source of data, and it's really been driving our innovation. So we really take careful notes and pay attention to when things work and when things don't work and try to build on that. Okay, let's see, some more pictures here. So this can illustrate the cramped conditions that we work under, but this is the stage right here, and I believe this is from a Bon Jovi show that we did in New Jersey. So we're often right next to the action, and we don't have, you can't bring a production truck in there into the auditorium, obviously. So it's sometimes nice to be able to just set up right next to it. You can see over here the rack of gear, some Blackmagic gear, some audio processing gear. The encoders are towards the bottom. Let's see, we employ a lot of different camera rigs, camera styles. This is a Movi setup, I believe. This is our setup at a festival. This is one of our stages. I'm about 1 for 6 on going to outdoor festivals and not having it rain cats and dogs on us. So mud and the elements are also something that we have to deal with a lot when doing these productions. let's see here. This is one of our production guys. He's setting up and cabling the rack. This is at the Head and the Heart at the Greek in Berkeley. This is the same sort of rig, but during the show at night. There's a PTZ operator, Shannon. Ty is technical director, and you can't really see him, but that's Danny Clinch as the director of the project. And Danny is a pretty superstar rock photographer in the rock world, and he's brought the artistic value of our game up a lot. Here's another shot. This is a festival, pretty small festival in Austin. Not one of the big ones, but nonetheless, we were out there doing it, working with the local radio station. And again, you can kind of see the gear here in the shock mount case. And these get shipped a lot on Southwest, and they get beat to hell pretty bad, but they hold up. So here's sort of a preview of our live encoders. The client software, a lot of functionality for what we've decided we need and what our clients have said they need. And the things that we like to monitor. And then we build it all into a very small 1RU rack mount case, but they're very powerful software-based encoders. Okay, so backhaul, I don't know how many people were in the last session, but I found it particularly interesting because this is something that we fight with a lot. And I would say it's one of our major pain points and what we spend a lot of time doing pre-production on is getting the signal back into our platform. So we're almost exclusively IP-based workflow, by the way. We don't really mess around. I put KU-band trucks on here, but we really rarely go that route. So we're almost exclusively IP. We rely on KA-band with our partner Viasat quite a bit, and this has been a great partnership. I've got some pictures of the dish set up in various places. There's always the consideration for line of sight. So sometimes we're setting up in a urban downtown area where you just can't get line of sight because there's tall buildings everywhere. And then weather, the rain fade can affect KA band. We usually cut through clouds pretty good. We've done stuff in the rain just fine. Really the only time we saw absolute outage of KA band was it was about maybe a month and a half ago. There was a tropical storm off the coast of I think North Carolina, and we were doing a show out of there, and there were just these huge bands of thunderstorms rolling through, and we could watch it on radar, and we were like, okay, well, in 15 minutes we're going to lose signal for about 5 minutes, and we just have to deal with it and go on. Sort of commercial grade connections are great. This can be symmetric fiber, Ethernet over copper. Honestly, though, in the venues that we're most often going into to do these shows, these are pretty rare, and to get one dropped is expensive. And the traditional telco world just doesn't like to work on an event-by-event basis. They want 2-year contracts to drop fiber into a venue. And unless we know that we're going to be doing 30 shows a year out of a venue, it's really not worth it. We've used cable modems that are already installed in venues a number of times, and this works pretty well, actually. We can call ahead of time and get the package bumped up if it's sort of a lower tier that they're already subscribed to, and then drop it back down after the show. So that's always a good option. The only thing here, though, is that if the cable modem's already there, it's usually shared among the whole back office production staff. And who knows when you're going to find a computer in a production office or in the manager's office that's got BitTorrent on it or something running, and it's just using up all the upstream. So, cable modem, the fact that it can be shared within the venue can really kill us sometimes. Cellular has been very hit or miss. I know that a lot of people are looking to cellular bonding, and I think that this is a great technology opportunity. In our experience, though, it's not something that I want to rely on when we're doing a big show. Another problem with it is that sometimes a venue can be a big old brick building, and when you actually get backstage and you set up, you basically have no signal back there, or not to any great extent. Fixed microwave is great when available. We've used this at some festivals, and this is always a really good option. Like I said, we really don't do much with KU-band trucks, but the price has come down a lot lately, and I think this was mentioned last panel. So this is still sitting on our radar, believe it or not. And then the other thing to note is that when we're using public transit, meaning like cable modem or pretty much anything else besides the Viasat satellite, we're going to cross the public internet at some point. And this is subject to outages. This is subject to congested peering points and packet loss. So there's some caveats there. OK, so with the KaBand satellite, oftentimes you've got to get it on the roof. So I'll tell my production crew, this dish, by the way, is great. This particular package of it is unbelievable. It folds up into a suitcase-sized thing that we can ship around. So I'll tell the production crew, OK, tie pieces of it to your back and up the ladder you go. I'm not carrying it up there. But then it gets set up on the roof, so often we're next to things like AC units and equipment. And this is really a great product. We, most of the time, get 12 megabits upstream, which is more than enough for our streams. Nominally, we send out about 2.6 to 4.5 megabits per second on a stream for our top level. Yeah?
Is there a reason, like size or cost, for not using C-band?
Size and cost, and sort of our pre-production is usually a pretty short, and as we've built this, we've gone almost exclusively on an IP-based workflow. So to incorporate C-band or KU-band, we would have to sort of back that into the workflow. But this is great. So this fits into our all IP, and this, if you remember the encoder that we're purpose building, they're actually a very compact unit. They're 1 RU, they're short depth. We do this because as we're doing IP from the field for contribution, we have to encode in the field. Now, we don't transcode in the field and make multiple renditions. We do that in the cloud. And that's sort of a big part of our workflow is transcoding in the cloud so we can work within a limited outbound bandwidth. All right, so just to catch up here. So we covered on-site and backhaul. All right, so network operations and engineering. Live event workloads pair great with public cloud. It's like the two were made for each other, in my opinion. We can bring up servers to do the transcoding to support an event. We can bring up 5 if we need to support 5 event, or 10 if we want backups. And then we tear them down after the end of the event. So this is a great pairing. It allows us to elastically scale out very easily. We combine a lot of off-the-shelf software with our custom software. So sort of our products that our CMS, Flight Deck, will then tie into Wowza, and then Wowza will then feed sort of our policy and service engine called Control Plane. And Control Plane is where we implement a lot of the pay-per-view type controls and policies. We've got a hybrid solution for the host site and for e-commerce, meaning we put some persistent stuff in the data center, and then we put elastic scale-out stuff in the cloud where it works well. CDNs are great for edge caching and delivery. We wouldn't be able to do what we do if the CDNs weren't where they are today and at their price points. It's really great. We're also multi-CDN enabled, and I'll get to that here in just a second. We do network and show monitoring for the duration of the event. So I'll park an engineer in front of the screen and say, OK, your job tonight is to watch this show for 3 hours. Listen to it carefully on headphones, watch it. If you see anything off, contact the site ops so that they can get a message to the director, to the audio engineer, and we can make corrections. The event only lasts 3 hours, so if we don't act fast, the whole thing will be spoiled. We've carefully selected all of our vendors, and we control as many variables as possible. We have our own player, we have our own encoders, we run our own cloud instances from a cloud provider, and all of this is about control and sort of knowing the whole pipeline, and if anything is amiss, we can take actions to correct it. And then lastly, there's that whole all eggs, one basket thing. Everybody has outages. Amazon has outages, Akamai has outages, Comcast has outages. Everybody can be subject, so it's good to sort of have multiple vendors, like multiple CDNs. So on the end user and customer support, first, not that we don't love our customers for being our customers, but they're an invaluable source of data. And everybody that has sort of a good customer pool size that they can mine should do so, because they've purchased a particular band. We know what kind of music they like. We know what part of the country they're in. These are things that tour managers like to know. So we are constantly developing new ways to sort of mine our customer pool for data. Now, that said, with our customers, if you take sort of the combination of whether they're using Mac or PC or Android or iOS, and they're on Comcast versus Time Warner versus AT&T, and that they've got wireless versus wired in their house, and you sort of put all these permutations together, it becomes a huge number. If you look through our user agent logs, we see people that are using terribly outdated browsers, and it's just like, oh, why are you doing that? Or iOS that's so many versions behind, you just want to scream. But we have to support them. They've paid money, and we have really two choices. We can either support them, or we can give them their money back, and we want to try to support them. We found that about 1% of our users will have issues, even on a technically perfect event. So if we have an event with 1,000 people watching, 10 of those people are just not going to be able to get it to work for whatever reason. And it's sometimes absolutely mind-boggling when we can't solve their problems. But fortunately, that number is as low as it is. And most of the time, that 1% of users, we can still help and get them on watching the show. But our time to resolution for these users needs to be in minutes. They don't want to miss a single song. This is a live event. They want to see it now while it's happening. They want to participate in the shared experience, and they don't want to be left out. And it really sucks for them if they're on the chat and they're seeing that everybody else is having this great experience and they can't get it to work. We don't want to just wash our hands of that. So we really try to support them. So I can't say fanatical support because I think that's trademarked. So I'll go with rabid customer support. And we do support by phone, chat, and email. And it's been really successful. And I think when somebody has a problem and they realize that we're there to support them and do our best to get them online and watching the show, they become a really loyal customer. And I think that this sort of, I'm kind of throwing it out to our industry as a whole, in that we need to make streaming as easy and reliable as traditional broadcast. If we really expect streaming to supplant traditional broadcast, like it looks like it's heading that way, we really need to make this as easy as possible for our end users. Okay, I threw this slide in kind of last minute, and I'll just jump through it quickly because it's sort of a side of live streaming. But if you're live streaming an event and nobody comes to it, does it really make a difference? Well, I think getting awareness of your event is pretty key. And when I started doing live streaming in 1999, reaching people was pretty much impossible. You could send an email and hope that people in 1999 checked their email frequently enough that you would be able to get them onto your event. But now with persistent connections on social media, you can reach people instantly, and they're always on. So this is great. So we try to work with every outlet possible. And really, in terms of raw numbers, the difference between a breaking even so-so event and a really profitable event can be a few hundred users. So we're not talking about moving the needle a huge amount. And reaching a few hundred people across the country can be done pretty easily, or a few hundred extra people, if we put some effort into promotion. And then lastly, this goes back to my mine your users for data. Follow up with your users. Treat them. Southwest Airlines has a great model in terms of engaging their best customers. So we're kind of modeling after that in terms of follow-up with our users and follow-through. Okay, just a quick couple of success stories. We did My Morning Jacket in Red Rocks in 2015. Red Rocks is a beautiful venue for those of you that haven't been there. It's absolutely one of my favorite places to see a concert. Outdoor, natural amphitheater kind of thing. The promotional engagement that we got from the band and their management was off the charts, and the success of the show reflected that. We had our all-star production crew headed by Danny Clinch. We had sort of our A-list shooters, our A-list gear. The event, sometimes you sacrifice a chicken to the voodoo video gods and everything goes perfect. And this was one of those nights where just everything coalesced great. It couldn't ask for better production. And a lot of people said that it was a landmark performance by Jim James in My Morning Jacket. So the footage was even used for an official video. For backhaul on this, I wanted to point out that we used the connection that was available at Red Rocks. They have a very strong connection that they've invested in there. It's a commercial grade. I assume it's fiber. I don't know the exact details of it, but it's plenty fast. And then the other sort of contrasting example that I want to use on success stories is Humphreys McGee Tour 2014 to 2015. So this is what the fans call couch tour. We do multiple stops, dozens of streams overall during the run. We heavily relied on the KaBand Satellite uplink because we were moving from one venue to the next so quickly, and there really wasn't a way to advance bandwidth at advanced connectivity at every site. Our crew lived on the Humphreys McGee crew bus, so they were actually integrated into the production crew, and so this actually reduced our costs greatly because we weren't paying for flights and hotels. We provided the streams at a low cost, both to us and to the audience at home, and it was really, I think, a great value. We used local shooters a lot, so we have a list of people in each city that we were hitting that we could call up to come and shoot, and instead of flying out shooters to each site. We made heavy use of PTZs, pan, tilt, zoom cameras, robotically controlled stuff, and also locked off angles. You can really get away with few shooters on a live stream if you have enough cameras sort of at locked off angles and you direct it correctly. We also really perfected our rapid deployment and teardown. Okay, so I feel it'd be dishonest if we said that every stream went great. Everybody that does live production knows that there are times when stuff just breaks and you have failure modes, and I think it's very important to own up to it and to try to forward the technology and forward how we handle these kind of things. Otherwise, we're going to have jackass tech writers telling us, oh, live streaming isn't ready for prime time yet again. And I see these kind of headlines in the tech press come across all the time. So I think we just need to recognize it. As I said earlier, we get one shot at this. We have to be on our game. And no matter how much we plan and try to be on our game, things will break. Every component in that block diagram that I showed will have a failure mode at some point of its own. And we don't always know how that will fail. So we can try our best to engineer around that and build in redundancy, but there's going to be some part of the system that breaks that you weren't expecting. We've had at an outdoor festival, a drunk guy stumbled into the dish and knocked it over and took the stream offline. And okay, so that won't happen with a satellite truck necessarily unless they climb up onto the satellite and are hanging from it. But things like that happen. And this was not, this was way backstage, cordoned off with bike gates, and it doesn't matter. There's always weather. You have bad cables. We had our chat system crash early on, and that was not so mission critical, but still people really like the chat. We've had our payment gateway crash, which is something that we can't do anything about, but it happens. Third-party APIs, we had the Facebook API break, and that caused slow loading of our site as it was timing out. We've had the whole site crash because developers got a little eager and tried to push out hot fixes and new features right before an event. We've uncovered really obscure hardware bugs and software bugs in the systems that we use. We've had power failures. One of my favorite is when there's a residential provider outage and we're doing a big stream and we have all these people that are on chat and they're like, I just lost everything. And it's like, well, your cable provider's down or they're having a huge issue, and we can link them to the down detector site or something like that. But at the end of the day, they're having a bad experience. And that's, as one of my developers says, life on the internet, and we just have to get on with it. Okay, so where I kind of see the future of live streaming and our productions going, in my mind, live content is the most compelling video content out there. Live holds sort of a unique place, and it could be a shared experience where that you're watching the same live content as somebody else and you're interacting with them on the chat, and it sort of becomes this, transcendent experience that you're experiencing as a group. And this really lends itself to concerts because that's sort of the same thing. You don't know the people next to you necessarily that you're watching the concert with, yet you're having a sort of shared experience with them, and that can really enhance it. Then again, if they're like spilling beer on you and shouting in your ear, it can kind of ruin it too. Anyway, the audience for live streaming is going to grow organically. More and more people are getting online. They realize that live streaming, big thanks to sort of our bigger colleagues at places like Yahoo that are live streaming a ton of events. And it's just raising awareness that, yes, this is a way that you can consume live music. The OTT and casting stick type devices, I think, are a great opportunity for UI, UX, and we really need to embrace these. People love watching. We've done some polling of our audience. They love watching our concerts on a big screen and hooked up to their good sound system. So the Chromecasts and Fire Sticks and all these other sort of devices are great for enabling this and making it easy. I think each component in that block diagram that I illustrated is ripe for innovation. Backhaul, transcoding, end user experience, all these sort of things are great places where we as an industry can continue to innovate. I think the big data and analytics play from the audience really represents some marketing and engineering gold. So we're just starting to mine a lot of this marketing data, and my engineers are going to start, they tell me at some point they'll start looking at the performance metrics of people watching our streams. And the last point is sort of the 4K VR immersive augmented stuff is really just starting to ramp up. And for doing concerts, I think that this is a real golden opportunity for us. Concerts themselves are sort of an augmented experience in multiple ways, right? The music is really loud, and there's a light show. And the light show doesn't really have anything to do with the band performing necessarily, but it augments the experience. And people like to sort of alter their consciousness at rock shows as well. So I think all of these sort of augmented experiences play really well into the VR immersive augmented reality experience. We can do things as part of the streaming concert experience that aren't physically possible that we can do in a sort of VR setting. So I'm very excited about that. All right, and I think, okay, and this is just a shot from Red Rocks. That's Denver off there in the background. Here are the rocks and the stage, and it's just really one of my favorite concert shots that we've got. And that's all I've got. I'd be happy to take any questions. Yes?
I've got one about the challenges of encoding a content where lights are flashing on and off and on.
Yeah, sure.
Did you have to do anything special to cope with that?
Yeah, so we, yeah, absolutely. Yep, grab a sip of coffee too. So the question was, how did we sort of tune our encoding to handle concert type footage, right? And strobe lights, right, okay. Right, so I'm sure you've seen starts strobing and gets really blocky, and yeah, so we tested a number of solutions, different codec providers. We like X264. I'm very interested in testing out this IQ264 that I heard a talk about this morning. So we'll be integrating that. Again, we build our own encoding clients so we can kind of pop in codecs easily like that and test them. So we took, I'll tell you the actual process. We took a loop of concert footage that we identified as being particularly challenging, and it included strobe lights and big color washes and beams and sort of all of those things and scene cuts. And we had it on a hyperdeck, and we played that on loop. And it was about a 1 or 2 minute piece when we played it on loop. And we tuned the encoder and the settings and pushed it about as hard as it would go on the CPU until the CPU couldn't keep up. And then that's where we set our mark.
Are they using standard-based
H.264, high profile, yeah. But parameters sort of tweaked on it. And then that's sort of what we built into our client for a given bit rate. And then we have different contribution bit rates with different settings, all sort of bound by the CPU. Anything else? Okay.
Do you a separate audio mix for your stream?
That's a good question.
One is the whole music rights issue.
Both good questions. Okay, so the first question is, do we do a separate audio mix for the stream? And the answer is sometimes. At certain festivals, particularly festivals, we find that the mix that we get is not great. It's more tuned for a big outdoor speaker setup, and oftentimes because the sets are shorter and the changeovers are quicker and more aggressive, and they're maybe they're bringing their own equipment in and out. So in that case, we've done separate audio mixes. We've also done some very well-produced shows where it was requested that we have a separate audio mix. Other times, when we work with the band a lot, with Humphreys McGee, for example, on their Matrix board, they have a profile just for TourGigs. And we've worked with them to tune that and tweak that. So the feed that they send us is a separate mix, but it's coming from their audio engineer that knows the band, and it's using the same Matrix, whatever console workstation that they have. And other times, we're not that lucky. We just have to take what we get in stereo. And left, right, here you go. We do put some audio processing gear into the rack as a bare minimum, like a compressor and EQ, so we can make some adjustments, worst case scenario. And the second question was concerning digital rights on the music. So we do everything by the book. We work with the bands primarily, so we're not going to stream anybody that doesn't want to be streamed. So that sort of takes care of that sort of immediate permission to do it, right? On things like selling the shows after the fact, we have an attorney who does all of the clearances for us. And those all, because they're sync rights, there's no compulsory licensing, so those have to be negotiated on an individual basis. And a lot of times, the bands that we like to cover in the jam space will play a lot of covers. So we'll have to go and get clearances on a lot of covers. And that can up the cost, and so we'll have to present to the band and be like, look, here's the price tag to get all of the cover songs that you played cleared. Do you want to keep them or do you want to cut them? So that's, but we do handle everything, and we've never been unable to clear a song. It only comes down to price. So there was a question back here. Yep. Sure. Okay, that's a great question. Yeah. That's a great question. So the question is, do our people that buy the stream, do they find us through our website and our brand, or do they come to us through the artist's website? And the answer to that is a little bit of both. Mostly, especially when we do a new band that we haven't streamed before, like we did a couple weeks ago, we did Jason Isbell at the Ryman. It was a great show. We were able to engage Jason Isbell's marketing and promotions team and their fan list and their mailing list because they've got the reach into their audience, right? TourGigs as a brand probably does not exist in the minds of a lot of these fans because it's not a band that we've touched before. On Humphreys McGee, on the other hand, where we've been working with them for over 2 years, the fans are aware of who we are. So we really like to use the audience reach of the band. And it's not always an easy thing. You'd think it would be as simple as saying like, hey, we're doing your stream, let's work and promote stuff together. Some management firms are not that receptive to it for whatever reason. Any other questions? Yeah.
How are you sustaining the cover production cost share on the revenue side on the backside of the model, in this type of entertainment space? And then I guess kind of a follow-up to that, just a clarification. So you are taking those performance royalty costs and passing those directly back into your client. Did I hear that?
So the question is, how do we?
How are you sustaining that model? I mean, cover the production costs and then do a rev share on the backside.
Right. Well, that's what we do. So we cover the production costs. And we do a rev share on the receipts for the live stream. Royalties do not, especially cover clearance, don't really factor into the live because until it's become a recorded copy and you've done a sync, it's not necessarily something that has to be addressed on the live stream. So there's sort of two different products, even though it's the same content in reality, right? There's the live product, and then there's the after-the-fact product. And the copyright laws are such that they apply differently to each. But it works. I mean, it's, we're growing the business. And the other thing that I want to add is that if you think about this on production costs, right? Production costs are relatively fixed. Our incremental cost for things like CDN delivery, for example, are variable but not super expensive, right? So as we increase sales on a particular show, the sale becomes more and more profitable. So the bigger the show we do, the more profitable it becomes, and the margins get bigger on shows as we go up. So really, it's the smaller scale stuff that's harder to sustain than the bigger stuff. And so I guess sort of from a business perspective, what we're trying to do is make sure that we have enough medium and large shows in our production pipeline, and we don't get overwhelmed with doing smaller productions that have almost the same costs from a production standpoint as the medium and large shows. Yeah.
Do you use the DRM to protect your content or prevent it from being?
It's a great question. It was, do we use DRM to protect our content? People, and I'm speaking on a panel more to this afternoon, so I don't want to spend too much time on it. But in a nutshell, no. People will grab our content even if there is DRM on it. They will just screen grab it and put it out there, and we see it. So until there's a good solution to stop people from screen grabbing, it's sort of just a technical exercise. Now, we do protect our content on a policy level to prevent loss of sales, especially on a live stream. Meaning, if we find somebody abusing our content and our AUP by screen grabbing and restreaming it through a free live streaming service, we can shut them down. And I think I'll touch on that in my panel a little bit more. So we try to, and we also do things to prevent people from using the same login multiple times and sharing a login with their friends. So we like to protect the content on a policy level, but not strictly using traditional DRM. I think you were next, yeah.
Are you always hardwiring in your cameras via like SDI or fiber, or have you had any success like wirelessly streaming between Backstage switch?
Okay, so the question was, do we always use hard lines and wire in the cameras, or do we sometimes use wireless? We sometimes use wireless. We often have 1 or 2 wireless links with the Teradek bolt. We've also played around with the Paralink Tomahawk, I think is another product that does about the same thing. So out of a 10 or 12 camera setup, 1 or 2 of those will be wireless. And that's the technology that we use. So we do a lot of cabling, and we've sort of invested a lot of thought in how we cable and how we sort of trunk out to set up multiple cameras.
Touch on your chat system a little bit. What kind of engagement levels are you seeing on that, and how do you use that to increase the interactivity?
Okay, so the question was, how do we, what sort of engagement do we see on our chat system, and then how do we use that down the road, and have we made it more interactive? Chat is, chat is sort of the killer second screen experience for concerts. People, for better or worse, love to talk about what's going on during the concert. Personally, I don't really talk to people during a concert, and if there's somebody behind me talking, I tend to move away from them. What we find is that there's sort of 2 pools of users, those that just go full screen and don't want to chat whatsoever, and those that will not shut up the entire concert. And will just be talking in chat about just whatever, just jibber-jabbering. So we look at the chat logs from an engineering standpoint, from a content standpoint, to sort of see how we're doing and provide feedback to ourselves on that. We also use the chat in support. Generally, if somebody's talking in the chat, and being and engaging with other users that are chatting in the chat, they're going to chat the entire show, which can be 3 hours. So this is engagement that's like off the chart for most forms of media, right? I mean, it basically just turns into a chat room with the show or the band being the focus, being the topic. And I have another client through our platform offering who's found the same thing, and he does sort of a talk show format thing, and he has users that get in there 30 minutes before the show and start talking with one another, and then they'll talk the entire show. In terms of interaction with the band, we haven't done anything where the band has had like a screen on the stage or something and said, okay, oh, they're like saying this. We're sort of talking about how we might do that in an experimental sense with some bands. Humphreys McGee, for example, has a show that they do called Bowl, where they actually put up a text shortcode to text to, and people sort of suggest the next song to play, or they suggest topic, like they do like an improv song, so people start suggesting all sorts of random topics, and then they display this on the iMag screens, and we're working with them to explore that further. So I think interaction, while maybe not great for every concert kind of thing, because some artists are just going to be like, you know, I'm here to play my songs, I don't really want to like chat with users. But in other settings where it's more of like an intimate type setting, because not every concert has to be a 3,000 person or 10,000 person cap arena. We can also do small studio type productions. And I think chat has a lot of legs there. Colin?
Can you tell us where are you guys right now in delivery with HDS, HLS, and Dash, and then where are you kind of 6, 12 months down the road?
Sure. Okay, so the question is, how do we actually deliver HLS, HDS, Dash, and what's that roadmap look like? We currently supply the content in HLS and HDS. When we started, we were doing RTMP because that was sort of a service that one of our vendors provided, and we didn't have to worry about it. But we found that there was just way too many limitations with delivering RTMP to the end user. So HLS, HDS, I'd like to unify eventually, and rather than unify on HLS and then just do Dash again in a couple of months, we're going to unify on Dash. So we're looking at bringing Dash into our player, and I think everybody's kind of on the same page there. From a workflow and technology standpoint, behind the player, nothing changes. Wowza supports Dash, the edge caching is all the same, so it should be a really easy transition. Oh, okay. I'll get somebody that I haven't talked to yet in back. Yeah.
Do you see any pros or cons with the DVR functionality in live streaming, especially in like a live music scenario?
Okay, so the question was, do we see any pros and cons with DVR functionality in a live concert setting? So we can easily have DVR. It's supported well within Wowza, and it's easy to implement into a player. One of the things that we talk about just in terms of user experience within the office is, well, one of the great things is that everybody is watching the same thing at once. And you know that plus or minus the 30 seconds or so delay in the transmission path, the people at the show are watching the same thing that you're watching at home. And if we start introducing DVR, we've discussed, well, will that really break the chat? How many people will sort of pause it or start it late or go back and then not be in sync with the rest? And will that negatively impact the user experience, or will it outweigh it? So I don't really have an answer to that, but it really boils down to what are the pros and cons, but from a user experience standpoint. Where I sort of do see it coming into play is sort of in the reloop or replay area when we rerun the show after the initial live performance. So, well, thanks very much for your attention and great questions, and I'll be around.